I welcome you all. Thanks for your willingness to join me in looking at the five levels of being. And it's really a way of looking at the comprehensive approach or the way of life that yoga offers us. My intention is to have each of us look very personally at these different aspects of our being and a willingness to look without shame, without trepidation at the different aspects of being and where we may struggle and where we can bring healing, where we can bring compassion and awareness. Let's look at that first handout that I sent. I sent it yesterday, and there were a few of you that weren't signed up yesterday, and I tried to send it to you today. And I can screen share this actually so that we can all look at it together. Good. Can you see that okay now? So let's focus on this left-hand column over here. This word that's in the heading, Koshas. The formal term is actually Maya Kosha, M-A-Y-A, Maya Kosha. And it's a term that's not seen in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, but it's found in the Upanishads. Swami Satchidananda, my teacher, didn't talk a lot about these levels of being, but I see how the way that he taught us reflects his understanding of them. And it's easy to see how the teachings of yoga are really meant to address all the levels of our being. So let's look at these levels. The actual first level, according to this teaching in the Upanishads of the Maya Koshas, is called the Annamaya Kosha. And I didn't, in this document, I didn't include the Sanskrit. It's not that important to me. Some of you may be interested in it. You can find it easily anywhere if you Google it. But simple to say, Annamaya Kosha, meaning food body or physical body. And the second, each one of them will have the term Maya Kosha, M-A-Y-A, Kosha. The second one is the subtle energy body or Pranamaya Kosha. So I'm leaving out these two first boxes here. The first of the Maya Kosha, the physical body. The second, the Pranamaya Kosha or the subtle energy body, the pranic body, right, that's made up of the nadis, the flow of prana. In the Chinese tradition, they call it the flow of qi or ki, and they call the pathways for that flow the meridians. And the next level is called Manomaya Kosha, M-A-N-O, Manomaya Kosha. And it's basically the sensory emotional mind or the instinctive mind, one level of the mind. And it's distinct enough from the intellect, the fourth level, intellectual kosha, or Vijnanamaya kosha. It's called Vijnanamaya kosha. It's distinct enough from that level of the mind that it's separated. And the last of the five is the Anandamaya kosha. Anandamaya kosha. Ananda meaning bliss, right? The bliss body. The aspect of our being that is already at peace, that is already connected to the universal spiritual consciousness. And maybe that's a better way to term this level that I've put in here. Instead of spiritual self, maybe it's better to put something like the universal consciousness, right? So this bliss body is the body of each of us as an individual that's connected to that universal consciousness. I'll say a little bit more about these five, and let me say from the beginning that questions, I welcome your questions, because then we make sure that we're talking about, that everybody's on the same page and that we're talking about something that matters. So don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask a question. Right now, screen sharing, I can't see you all. So just unmute yourself and speak up. No problem. I'll say a little bit more about these. They're easy enough to distinguish. Everything in nature has a physical body. Everything that we experience, that we can see, that we perceive, has a physical body, right? Even inanimate objects like a rock, right? A stone, a brick, a piece of wood, it has a physical body. But not everything like that has a subtle energy body. So a plant, for example, has both a physical body and a subtle energy body. Subtle energy body in the plant will respond to stimulus. So your plants will respond to the energy that you put off. They'll respond to the atmosphere around them. Even though the plant doesn't have eyes or ears, the plant doesn't have senses in the way that we understand senses. And the plant doesn't really have an emotion the way that we talk about emotions. All right? But if we go up to another level, the sensory emotional body, the Manomaya Kosha, then we can use an animal as an example. An animal has the physical body, the subtle energy body, and the animal has the sensory emotional body active. The animal experiences, it perceives through the eyes, ears, nose, etc., and it experiences emotion, anger, fear, etc. A whole range of emotion is possible in the animal. But the animal doesn't have the same kind of intellectual body that a human being has. And there may be exceptions to that. Maybe some cats have this. I'm not sure if we can say for sure. But generally speaking, the intellect would be the aspect of the mind that's capable of analyzing the emotions, that's capable of self-analysis and reflection. That we could choose, for example, to decide that anger is not really beneficial or called for. We could decide that there's no need for me to be afraid of public speaking. These are all my friends here. I can speak comfortably, and even though the fear may be there, I don't need to heed that. Right? So there's the ability of the intellect to reflect on all the other levels of being. So that's a little bit about each of these levels and the distinction between them. And I put these other two boxes here because if we think about how does our being, our whole being, how does our whole being manifest? It manifests into behaviors. That's the outermost expression of who we are. You could say that who you are ultimately manifests into behavior. And if you encounter another person, how do you really get to know that other person? You can't see right into their intellect. You can't know what's going on emotionally. You can see their physical level, but how you really get to know another person is by their behavior. Right? What do they say to you? How do they act? Right? So the expression of who we are is in our behavior. And I put attitudes along there as well, because there's attitudes towards other people, attitudes and behaviors towards other people, and then there's attitudes and behaviors towards ourselves. So I've noted those here. And the reason why I think attitudes are so important to include is because our behavior is not always symptomatic of the attitude or intention behind it. So you might knock someone down. The action, the physical action, is you're knocking someone down, but you're pushing someone. But if the intention is to push you out of the way of the car that's coming, right? So then you're not attempting to hurt someone, you're actually attempting to save them. So the intention behind the physical or the external action is also very important. And the teachings of yoga help us understand that when we're examining our behavior, we also want to understand the intention or the attitude behind it. So, any questions about just looking at the levels of being without getting into the limbs of yoga? Okay, I'll take that as no questions. Good. Then I'll say something just very general about the goal of yoga practice. One way to speak about it is yoga practice is meant to help us experience our full potential as human beings, to experience the different aspects of our being as an integrated whole, and to experience the sense of natural contentment and completeness that comes from experiencing all the levels of our being, including the bliss body, including the way that we are a drop in the ocean of consciousness. But our drop is the same substance as the ocean of consciousness. That's an analogy that's often been used to explain this idea that at the same time that we feel separate, we are at one with this universal consciousness that is the very essence of our being. We appear to be separate in a separate body-mind, but we're intimately interconnected with the whole web of life, at a level beyond the level of physical perception. The problem with the culture that we live in is so much of our way of understanding ourselves in the world is based on this very limited physical perception, right? In our culture, there's even a saying, seeing is believing. Seeing is believing. I'm going to stop the screen for share for a second so I can see you all. And we sort of assume that what we can see is that's how things are. Right? If we can't see it, then it's not true. And it doesn't exist. But of course, we also know that that's not so. We know that even though the sun appears to travel across the sky, the sun is actually not traveling at all. Instead, the earth is turning. No, even though the earth appears to be relatively flat, as we look across the ocean toward the horizon, we know that that's not true at all. The earth is not flat at all. So we know that there's great limitations to the physical sensation of sight or any of the physical sensations. But that's the way our culture tends to see things in this very limited way. All the spiritual traditions and the great masters, the saints, the yoga masters, they all speak about the same kind of natural sense of contentment and completeness that I referred to, right? This natural sense of connection to the whole web of life, right? Knowing that we're a part of this greater whole. And along with that natural sense of connection is a natural sense of compassion for each other, because we are a part of each other. We're interconnected with each other. We are a part of the same human body, right? The one universal human body. We're all parts of it. We're all cells in that universal body, you could say. So there's a poem that I love that says something about one of the benefits of the heart breaking is then it knows that it's no longer beating only for itself. I love that idea. Our hearts are not beating only for ourselves. Right? Consider the cell in the human body, right, is working in harmony with all the other cells. Right? And that's the calling. That's our true nature. That's what we're called to do, to function in harmony with the higher will, to align our behavior, our thinking with this universal will. And that's what brings great fulfillment to our lives, right? If you ask people, what brings you great joy, right? There are many things, and one of them is loving someone else, serving, helping, right? Supporting. Those are some of the things that bring great joy and fulfillment to our lives, because we're acting in harmony with our true nature. We're allowing the natural flow of love to flow through us. And that's what really feels good. Right? But of course, it's difficult to experience ourselves that way because of the way our culture trains us to see ourselves as separate beings. Actually, if I go back to the screen share for a minute, you see this line right here between the bliss body and the intellect? But you see that line, right? Somebody give me a thumbs up. You can see the line I'm intending between the intellect and the bliss body. So, and this is well stated in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which is a book that I'll refer to, that if our intellectual body is formed under the misapprehension or ignorance about who we truly are, if our understanding of ourselves and the way that we relate to life is formed without the experience of the bliss body, it's formed under the influence of the prevailing messages of our culture, then we're trained, we're socialized to see ourselves as separate beings. Right? And as separate beings, we pursue security and happiness as an individual, working primarily for ourselves. Right? It's a recipe for selfishness, for focusing on me first. Right? Some of you know this anecdote, you've heard it no doubt, that's told about Swami Satchidananda speaking to a group of healthcare practitioners in a hospital. And they asked him, can you speak about some underlying cause of disease? From a spiritual point of view, can you speak about some underlying cause of disease? And he went to a whiteboard in that room where they were, and he wrote on the board the word illness, and then he wrote the word wellness, and he went back and circled the I and circled the we, and that was his answer. But the underlying cause of so much of our suffering is this illusion of separation. And the way that we experience these levels of our being, the physical, the sensory emotional, and the intellect, without really being in touch with the bliss body. Because the way that we even are socialized, right? The way that we come to understand ourselves and relate to the world is missing that crucial piece. Does that make sense to you all? Right? The world that we live in tells us in so many ways that we're each separate, and as separate beings, we'll find happiness by acquiring and achieving the things that make for a happy life. If you look good enough, see if this rings true to you. This is a kind of an example of the messages of the culture. If you look good, right? If you are successful with earning money, if you have a good home and a good vacation spot, if you're attractive enough as a person, then you can win the love of another person, and you can have a partner and a family. And these are seen as the ways to achieve happiness, right? You have the means then to purchase whatever you need in order to have a happy life, a comfortable life. Right? Then if you can manage to avoid traffic, buy all your clothes on sale, and make good friends with a massage therapist, a plumber, and a doctor, then you've got a recipe for a really happy life. And unconsciously, I would say many people go about just trying to arrange for a happy life, trying to get all the pieces of the puzzle into place so the life can be happy. And all of that is based on the absence of this experience, the bliss body. Because if so much of our lives are based on what we can do to achieve or acquire or to arrange for happiness, we're missing the fact that there's happiness here already. And of course, there's nothing wrong with all of these things. I love to buy my clothing on sale. Everybody wants a healthy, comfortable body. There's nothing wrong with a good livelihood, support yourself properly, and having the love of other people in your life. These are all wonderful things. But if we think that our own ability to be content in the present moment is dependent on these things, right? Then the life becomes a relentless roller coaster ride of being happy when everything's going right and being sad when things are going wrong, when we aren't acquiring or achieving things the way that we want or the way we envisioned. Right? So in the absence of this, experiencing this fifth level of being, the Anandamaya Kosha, the bliss body, right? We set off in life to try to get the things that seem like they would bring it to us. Right? Any questions about this? I'm going to stop the screen share so I can see. Okay. I know many of you are pretty experienced yoga practitioners. Many of you are teachers, so this may all be something you understand already. But go ahead, Sonia.
I was just going to say, I've never thought about it in this sort of, I don't know why I haven't. I guess I've just thought about it theoretically or as part of my five, again, maybe, but hearing this is like this is sort of the universal wound of separation. I haven't really ever thought of it this way before, and I'm feeling very grateful for for that inspiration to hold on to this new way of understanding that many people, and parts of myself probably aren't fully aware of this Anandamaya Kosha.
Yeah, and at least those of us that have some form of spiritual practice, we have a sense of it, right? We have had a taste of it, and maybe we've had a good dose of it in our lives. So we're blessed to have that opportunity to touch that place in ourselves and know that it's there, even if we don't experience it all the time. But how many people have no sense of that at all, right? And they're lost in this effort to make things work in their lives in order to be happy. And of course, if one partner doesn't do it, then divorce and look for another partner who will be the right answer. If this amount of money isn't enough, then more money to get more things to try again. I'll never forget once when I was teaching in Florida, we had the opportunity to use the home of this wealthy family in Florida. And they had Kalyani, you'll remember this. Do you remember when Gopal? Mm-hmm. Remember when Gopal was brought us to that home, that really wealthy home in Florida? That just came back to my mind. Yeah. And this had a beautiful, beautiful home with its own beach. right, on the east coast of Florida. What is the town that was in?
That was Delray Beach.
That was Delray Beach, yeah. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. But then Gopal told us, yeah, these people, they got tired of it. They're looking for something else. They're going to sell it.
And they got divorced at the same time.
They got divorced. And he mentioned how the wife would often go to New York for the fashion shows. And it just reminded me of, somebody with a lot of means, but somehow they're not satisfied. And I don't mean to just criticize the rich, but I see it in myself, the very same impulse in myself to look for something, right, as the thing that makes me feel okay or feel good about myself or feel satisfied with my life. I think we have it's ingrained in all of us, right? Because again, I'll make this point, because it's of the way that our understanding of ourselves in the world is formed under the influence of this absence of the Anandamaya Kosha. And the Yoga Sutras say it very clearly that as soon as you can quiet that intellect, now I'll go back to the screen share for a second because this is helpful. Many of you have studied the Yoga Sutras. Some of you have studied them with me. And the Yoga Sutras say that if you can quiet the intellectual, if you can actually help the physical body be calm and relaxed and let the subtle energy flow more fully and bring the sensory emotional body or mind into balance. And if you can calm and quiet the intellect and all the thoughts in the mind, then you experience the bliss body. That's what basically with the Yoga Sutras are telling us, all right? Through the practice of the 8 limbs of yoga. Sathine, go ahead.
I've often had this question that in order to experience Anandamaya, it has occurred to me, and it's been my experience, that you have to feel safe. And we're going through a time of a lot of not feeling safe. And I wonder if you couldn't speak a little bit about that.
Oh, yes. Well, it's
sorry.
No. It's a great point. I totally agree with that statement. I mean, think of it. At every level of our being, safety is important. If the physical body is not safe, what does it do? It tightens up. All right. Actually, this is a great way to segue into something else I wanted to talk about, Sathine. So thank you for that. And that is that something that the understanding of yoga masters of the Koshas helps us know is that the more subtle levels of being influence the development of the grosser ones. All right? So potentially the bliss body, which is the most subtle level of our being, it can inform and inspire, then govern all the other levels of being. It should radiate throughout our being. But because we're cut off from that bliss body, then who we are is governed by the intellect, the ideas in the mind. Right? And until we quiet all of those ideas, the way that we experience all the levels of our being, they're all, you could say, governed by, influenced by the ideas, the beliefs, conscious or unconscious beliefs in the intellect. Right? So if you grow up, and I'm coming to the question, Sathine, if you grow up with this belief that life is dangerous. Now, most of us don't grow up that way, but some people do. Imagine you grow up in an environment where it's dangerous, right? And it's every man for itself, and it's a dog-eat-dog world, and you better watch your back, right? Imagine you grow up in that environment, and that's the belief system that your self-identity is formed under, right? Then, because it's already ingrained in your intellectual body, then it's going to manifest. You're going to see it. In other words, what you believe, you're going to see what you believe. If you believe it's dangerous, you're going to see danger. Right? So that the belief system in the intellect is going to govern or influence the formation of your sensory emotional. You're going to see danger and you're going to be afraid. Right? So to some degree, all of us have this. Every one of us has this to some degree. Because as an individual, as a separate person, we are fragile, we are vulnerable. So we all have this sense of fragility and vulnerability built into this, our experience of who we are, right, as a separate being. In the sense, we all have it, but some people to a greater degree than others. If you grow up in a traumatic environment, then you do things to armor yourself, right? To protect yourself, right? A traumatic or dangerous environment, the sensory emotional mind, you're on edge, right? You're influenced by the fear that you experience. And then it manifests into the subtle energy body. Imagine that as a means of self-protection, you armor the heart, right? You close the heart. What does that do to your energy body? Out of fear, right? Because of the fear, you armor the heart. So your subtle energy body, the heart chakra, the prana that would normally flow through the heart chakra gets diminished, obstructed by that fear, right? And thus, you have something like heart disease, right? Over a lifetime, a chronic condition can develop from this situation of having a closed heart, a heart that's influenced so much by fear or by hatred, etc. And then the way that the subtle energy body flows influences the formation of the physical level. Right? So if you believe it's a scary world, a dangerous world, you see danger, you experience fear, it influences the flow of your subtle energy, right? Not just through the heart chakra, but your whole being. And eventually it manifests in the physical level. So anything that powerfully exists within us, like our belief system, reverberates through all the levels and ultimately manifests on the physical level. So hence the saying, as you think, so you become, right? What you believe ultimately determines who you are and then manifests into your behavior. So you could say, from the yogic understanding, the source of all our suffering begins here in the intellect with our beliefs. Right? If you believe you're a separate person, if your whole way of understanding yourself and the world is built on the illusion of separation, then that's the beginning of suffering. And that's the beginning of fear also. Sathine brings up a beautiful point that in order to bring healing to any of the levels, there needs to be some safety, right? If you really want the physical level to be as healthy, to experience its full potential for optimum health, right? Whether you have sickness or not, a broken bone or not, whether your spine has kyphosis or scoliosis, it doesn't matter. You can still have optimal health if the body is relaxed. If the body is relaxed. And for the body to relax, it requires safety. So most of us that grow up in a fairly safe environment and can practice yoga in a fairly safe environment, even if we've had trauma in our past, we're bringing that safety to the physical level to enable us to relax the tensions that have built up and maybe been logged into our system from the past. We all know that as yoga teachers, and maybe as yoga students, you've experienced this, that oftentimes when you stretch and move the body in specific ways, physical tension releases, right? That was held there as a residue from previous experience. So the to practice in a safe environment enables the body to release those tensions that may have been held in the body from long before. Go ahead, Sarani.
I understand what you're saying about, as you think, so you become, but what about fate or circumstances, or I don't know if we want to use the word karma, but there are, to me, in my experience, and maybe I'm thinking about this in a non-yogic way, I don't know, but there are situations and people's circumstances in life that no matter what their belief system is, they're going to suffer. They're in a place of extreme difficulty or whatever you want to call it. And how does that fit into this way of thinking or this belief?
Yeah. So I've been speaking about how the formation of our understanding of ourselves and the way the world works and what happiness is like, it's all formed under the influence of our culture. But you could say it's also something we bring with us from our past. And, whether you believe in reincarnation and karma or not, you can just see that it's something that you didn't ask for, but it's a condition that exists within you. It's ingrained in you. Whether you believe it just came from this lifetime and the way you were raised and the trauma you experienced in this lifetime, or you believe that it came partially from the past, left over from previous births. I do believe that way. And so you bring these ways of understanding yourself and the world from the past, this kind of previous experience, right? And you draw to yourself the lessons in this lifetime that help you awaken. Whether you think of it as karma or not, ultimately, we have, and this is what I think is important, Sarani, no matter what the cause of suffering is, the suffering presents us with an opportunity to awaken. The suffering presents us with an opportunity to encounter it in a healthy way and learn from it, whether it's from a past life or this life. Go ahead, Sarani.
Okay. I guess I've been dealing with this struggle my entire adult life, I think. And so if I look at, say, take in the idea of refugees or the idea of people who are experiencing racism, or someone who is, physically, mentally ill. I guess I don't really, to me, reincarnation is kind of a construct that we have come up with, like heaven and hell or whatever other belief systems people might have. It just doesn't, I don't know how to explain it. It doesn't, that doesn't resonate with me. And to see people suffering in such an innocent way or an unasked for way, they're being moved by fate in ways that they have no real power over. Can you say a little bit more about that?
So what I'm hearing you say is something that makes you suffer is to see the suffering of other people who have no control over what's happening to them and have no choice of their own or no deeds for no reason of their own.
Right.
They're suffering. And that's what one of the things that makes you suffer.
Right.
To see that. Who of us can say for sure how to make sense of the incredible inequality, injustice, and suffering that we witness in our world? How can I don't know how to explain that. the only, like you say, construct that makes sense to me is to believe that over the course of lifetimes, that an individual has the opportunity to free themselves by learning lessons and to awaken fully to their true nature, to experience that ananda. That's the only explanation I've heard that makes much sense to me. But I agree with you. I can't say for sure. And I can't explain the suffering. Why is a baby born with a disability or without one of their limbs, or into a family that is all slaughtered, by some genocide? Who can explain that? There's so much of that in our world. But what we can do is we can learn to encounter we ourselves, and for ourselves, we can learn to look into what makes us suffer and learn from it.
And using the yamas and the niyamas as the way to respond. That's the one thing that I've found in the teachings that have really helped me, is just to really try to, and when you're in the midst of the suffering, you may not, or grief or whatever, you may not really be able to do it right in that moment, but that's where I found real solace, I think, is in the yamas and the niyamas. Yeah. Agreed.
A very basic teaching that's found within yoga, Buddhism, probably in all spiritual traditions. We can't really control what happens in the world around us, the events. We can't control what happens to us. We do our best to manage our lives, but we can't make things happen the way we want. What we do have control over is how we respond to life. That's where we have some level of control, how we respond to what happens to us, how we respond to what happens in the world around us. That we have a choice in. And that's where yoga teaches us to put our focus. The Buddha didn't really go into, I use an example of someone didn't go into talking about God and didn't dwell on reincarnation so much, if I understand correctly. He just wanted people to be present and deal with life right here, right now, in front of them. And so many ways the teachings of yoga encourage us as well to put our focus on where we actually can make a difference. And I agree with you, Sarani. The yama and niyama are a great place to start. And my intention for this course is to, of course, in a way, this healing the 5 levels of being is a lifetime practice. So in 3 weeks, we can only do so much, but we can at least get a good grip on where we need to work right now, right? And that will evolve over time. Let me go back to the screen share. This is what I'd like us to do. Well, I was talking about how the subtle levels of our being influence and govern the grosser levels. And as you think, so you become. But yoga teaches us that the opposite's also true. The more gross levels give us access to the subtle level. So it's difficult to go right in there and change the belief system in the intellect. Right? You can't just change your mind. So when someone's really upset and they're freaking out and they're really, really upset, what do you say to a person like that? You don't say to them, just quiet your mind down. Right? What do you say to a person like that? Really upset.
Take a deep breath.
Say it again.
Take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath. Thank you. Exactly. Yeah. We all know that. So you don't go to the mind. You go to something much grosser, more controllable than the mind, the breath. Right? You would do something physical. And that physical deep breathing has an impact on the physical body. And it helps to calm the nervous system, and it has an impact on the subtle energy body and on the sensory emotional body, and eventually on the mind. Right? So instead of trying to quiet the mind, we do something on the gross level that tends to help us gain access to the more subtle levels. Right? And that's why yoga practice begins so much with the asana practice, and then with pranayama, and then with pratyahara and dharana. Right? So we don't try to go straight to meditation. You can. There's certainly nothing wrong with it. And you can begin practicing meditation right away. But a great preparation for meditation is to get the body to be steady and relaxed, to be comfortable. But the Yoga Sutras also teach us that an excellent preparation for all of these limbs of yoga, for these other limbs of yoga, these practices, is yama and niyama. And Sarani hit on it right away. In a way, an excellent foundation for healing the levels of our being is the practice of the yama. Because here we begin to align our behavior with the bliss body. We already start with this at this level, the behavior level, to align our behavior with the bliss body. Right? So we're starting to act in ways that are in harmony with our true nature. But that requires self-awareness. That requires introspection. I sent you another document. Let me see if I can screen share this other document. So I sent you this document also. And it's a way of, it's a series of questions to reflect on the different levels of being. So, for example, is there a teaching that you believe in, but you find it hard to live by? Is there some old way of thinking that you see isn't useful, but you still, do you see where I'm reading? But you find it difficult to let go of it? Is there a major lesson you seem to be learning in this lifetime? It comes up over and over. So that's a way of reflecting on the intellectual level. And in this column is yoga teachings or practices that may be useful in healing the intellect. And I'm going to go downward. Let's look at number 6. I want to sort of approach this in reverse order. Is there some behavior that you see manifesting or that you see in yourself? Is there some behavior you see in yourself that's not in harmony with your spiritual values? Right? So what I mean to suggest, and we'll continue to do this over the next 2 sessions beyond this one, and that is we'll continue to reflect on each level of being. And even before reflecting on the physical level, the pranic body, the sensory emotional mind, I want us to reflect on our behavior. All right. So is there some behavior that, like, you really believe in ahimsa, nonviolence, you really believe in honesty, but when someone cuts you off in traffic, you find yourself cursing at them. So that's an example of how, in certain circumstances, we find it difficult to live up to our values, right? To really embody them. So the yama, I sent you another document. Most of you are familiar with the 8 limbs of yoga. I sent you another document called the 8 limbs of yoga that lists the yama. Yama are certain practices, things like nonviolence, honesty, respect for others, another person's property, refraining from greed, refraining from hurting anyone through your sexual life, and even refraining from wasting your energy. These are some of the yama. But really, any spiritual teaching that you think would really help you live in harmony with your true nature, that would help you really think about, and any spiritual teaching that would help you align your behavior with your values, with the spiritual teachings. And I'm going to suggest that each person pick one of the yama, meaning practice something like compassion for others, or practice honesty, or practice respecting the property of others. Find some way of practicing one of those principles. Or again, I'll repeat, any teaching. And then the other thing I want to suggest, because I see that we're already starting to run out of time, we think about the physical body, the Annamaya Kosha, and we start practicing applying the same intention to healing the Annamaya Kosha, or physical body. So maybe I'll go back to this document for a second. Look at number 4, question number 4. Is there some predominant physical need that you have? Can you see a connection to that and your answer to the previous questions? Basically, I'd like each person to also think about what physical practice would bring healing and balance. Do you need a more vigorous or a more gentle yoga practice? Do you need more relaxation? Do you need more sleep? Would adapting your diet or modifying your diet be helpful? Do you need more physical exercise? So these are all things that work on the physical level. And of course, I'm just listing a few ideas there. You don't have to stick to one of those ideas. But think about what would bring healing and balance to the physical level. And the other thing I want to suggest between now and next Thursday is a regular yoga practice. I know some of you, and I know that some of you already have a regular yoga practice, but some of you may not. It's easy to come and go with a regular practice, to be committed to it for a little while and then to fall off, or to lose interest in it, or life gets dominated by some problem that you're dealing with, and you lose the time to do physical practice. I'm going to suggest that everyone, as much as you can, over this next week, spend at least 10 minutes, if not more, doing some yoga asana practice. At least 10 minutes yoga asana, and that's a minimal amount. Personally, I like to spend at least 30 minutes with yoga asana every day, at least that. If you take a yoga class, it's often like an hour, right? Or an hour and a half even. So 10 minutes is not that much. Hopefully everyone can do that. At least 10 minutes of asana and about 10 minutes of breathing, or even 6 minutes of breathing. I'll try to make it minimal. And then 10 minutes of meditation. So that's what I'd like to suggest, if possible. And, you have to adapt it to what's practical for you. But what I'd like to suggest is twofold: that you pick one of the yama that are listed in the 8 limbs of yoga as the first limb, the yama, and that you try to stick to at least some practice of asana, pranayama, and meditation on a daily basis. And the reason I want to suggest that is because that's what helps us begin to experience or touch that Anandamaya Kosha. So a regular meditative practice enables us to touch that level of being. And the practice of one of the yama helps us begin to explore our behavior and the intentions behind it. And whenever we see that our intentions are based on thinking only of ourselves, then we've begun to uncover an element of our suffering, something that makes us suffer. So when you can see that your intention is motivated by taking care of only of yourself instead of thinking of the well-being of everyone, then you have the choice, the opportunity to shift your intention, to think about the well-being of everyone. And that's why the Yama exists, to help us shift our intentions from behavior that's only based on me-centered way of thinking, to shift to a we-centered way of thinking. So that's sort of 2 assignments. Pick a Yama to work with for the next week and commit yourself to a regular meditative practice. And what my plan to do in the next couple of weeks is to do some real, you can look at that document I was just screen sharing, the reflections. I'll show it again. You can look at this on your own. And these questions are just questions I made up. So you can begin to explore on your own these different questions that relate to the different aspects of our being. Is there a predominant emotion you experience? And these are questions that relate to the energy body and the different chakras. Then a question relating to the physical body. So you can explore that on your own, and we'll talk about some of these things on next Thursday, and then the following Thursday, the 3rd Thursday, we'll talk about some of the other ones. So don't feel like you have to go through this whole document. It's a lot. We can do that together in the subsequent sessions. One of the questions that Sarani asked, and Jackie mentioned it also, when we were talking about what we want to get out of this course. Some of the comments were on suffering. And I think to some degree, that's relevant to all of us. And that's something I want to focus on in the next session. Is there are 3 of the Niyama that are encapsulated in the 1st sutra of the 2nd chapter of the Yoga Sutras. Some of you are familiar with that. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the 2nd chapter, the 1st sutra, our first principle that's given there. It offers this beautiful approach to encountering life with a spiritual intention, right? With an intention to grow spiritually. And summarizing it, it suggests that when we encounter suffering, that we first of all accept it rather than reject it, rather than escape it, run away from it, pretend it's not there, deny it, or cover it up, that we accept it. Not that we look for suffering, not that we try to make ourselves suffering, but when we see that we are suffering, when our hearts are really hurting, when we're anxious, when we're angry, when we're suffering in some way, that we first of all accept it and know that ultimately being with it and going into it is what can help us unravel the source of that suffering and become free of it. So if you're inspired to read in the Yoga Sutras, you can read that sutra, 1st sutra of the 2nd chapter. And we'll talk about that next week. And then we'll proceed to look at some of the other levels of being. Any question? Any comment?
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Sonia.
I read something once that our true personality includes the entire world. And I just love that phrase. And, this, and then, but when you were talking about just being with what you can actually impact, those around you, that sort of think globally, act locally, mindset that doesn't spin the mind so much in, what we can't accomplish, or what, what isn't readily available for our love to heal. There's something really beautiful about everything you've said here that I'm just trying. I've been drinking like a camel, and I'm just going to have it all week to think about it. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Make note of any questions. We can talk next week. You're reminding me of this way that Swami Satchidananda often spoke, that we can't solve the problems in the world. What we can do is heal our own hearts. Because the thing that we can bring most fully into the world is our own peace. And if you look at the people who had the greatest impact on the consciousness of our world, they're the people that found that peace within themselves. People like Jesus and Buddha, Muhammad, right? Because they have an impact not just on the consciousness of the planet when they were there, but for thousands of years afterwards. So if we want to really contribute and relieve the suffering in the world around us, we have to start with healing our own hearts. I remember right after 9/11, Thich Nhat Hanh beautifully spoke about this, that he said something like, the source of violence is in the human heart, right? So instead of having us point the finger at those who committed that violence that occurred at 9/11, he had us examine our own hearts and heal our own hearts, because that's where we can start. And that's how we can bring healing and peace into the collective consciousness. That's our contribution to it. And of course, as Sarni, you kind of brought up, that doesn't really address what's happening in the world around us. But as long as we're haunted by that suffering, as long as we're tortured by it, right, we're not contributing to the solution. It's something that the nature of injustice on that scale is something that our limited minds can't quite comprehend. I was thinking that we do some practice together as a part of this, and that's my intention for the next 2 sessions, that we do some practice together. We're already at our ending time, I think. 2 minutes. But let's do a little bit of practice together. And if you need to leave, that's fine, go ahead. But what I'd like us to do is even for just a few minutes, be quiet together. And what really inspires me to make good use of when I meditate, because, when we meditate, it's so easy to have the mind just gravitate towards my problems and my to-do list and to remember all the things I need to do. It's so easy just to spend the whole time floating around in that world of my mind and my thoughts. But when I remember that, I can either dwell on all my same thoughts that I normally think about and swim around in there, or I can be quiet enough to allow a much higher intelligence to be active, to speak to me. I can allow the voice of God to be present within me if I can let go for a few minutes of my own worries and concerns. Right? I can make space for this Anandamaya Kosha, this bliss body, to be present as soon as I quiet the mind. Right? So that inspires me. Oh, I'm going to use that as a way to inspire all of us to be quiet together for a few minutes. And I'll just lead a brief practice. I'll suggest that you modify your seated position in any way that you can that allows you to sit up erect. So we want to sit with some presence, some alertness in the body, allowing the spine to be the core of support and the rest of the body to relax around that central core. Want the abdomen to be soft, the legs relaxed, the shoulders released downward, and the hands soft, forming a mudra if you like. Let the jaw relax and the eyes soften. If you like, even consciously soften the area right behind the eyes in the center of the head. With the body relaxed, yet spacious, take a few deep breaths in whatever way you know. Slow, deep, wave-like breaths, filling the lungs and emptying them. Then relax the breath. Watch the breath fall into its own natural rhythm, uncontrolled. And with the body steady, the breath steady, attempt to stand apart from your own mind and thoughts and see what thoughts arise on their own into your awareness. Without dwelling on any one of them, welcome and watch them come, letting them go. So this means we stand apart from the thoughts as a witness to them. We are a presence observing what arises, letting it come and go. And for just a minute or two, the last step, make a conscious choice to let go of thinking and to center yourself in the place that you watch from. The simple, unchanging awareness behind the body, breath, and mind. Allow yourself to rest there. Let's finish with a simple closing chant that many of you know. The chant is Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, a way of sending peaceful, healing energy outward. If you like, bring your hands together at the heart. Feel that you can generate this peaceful or healing energy inside yourself and send it psychically outward through the heart. And if you know the chant, chant along with me. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May the entire universe be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May the light of truth dispel all ignorance. Victory to that light. Jai Sri Satguru Maharaj Ki Jai.